What up? Let's get weird. It's your boy Tommy G. We're coming at you with Game Theory Thursdays here. This is a new segment. We have short slates on all the sites on Thursdays. So instead of talking about cartoons and girls and nonsense, we want to kind of take this time to get into some more, how to play these games, how to manage your bankroll even. So it won't necessarily just be game theory. It'll just be a lot of the questions that we get on Twitter, most revolving around game theory, contrarian plays, leverage plays, things like that. Get into some bankroll, get into some of the stuff that we really don't get a chance to talk about because we're too busy spending the shows giving picks away. And who better to talk about game theory than probably the only other person in the industry who prides himself on his game theory, GPP plays, contrarian plays. Probably the only person more than myself who prides himself on it is Jeff Collins. One of the reasons I brought him on board. We're very, very different in a lot of ways, but the one thing we do share is kind of our game theory views. So, Jeff, what's up, brother? How you doing, bro?
Hey, dude, what's up? Did I catch you say that we're not going to be talking about girls on this podcast? Is that?
I know we probably will. I just don't want to make it part of the plan.
Okay, cool.
And
yeah,
honestly, on top of our game theory analysis and GPP strategy, we probably combined get laid more than the whole entire industry. So I think we have if we did want to talk about girls, I think we're the authority there too.
No comment. Yeah, I really like game theory and talking about game theory and trying to figure out how to quantify values and percentages and probabilities and all that sort of stuff. And, game theory, just the idea of it is basically trying to outthink your opponent, right? It's about combining all the factors together and figuring out, okay, if my opponent's going to do this, then what is the most advantageous thing for me to do? And there are plenty of like real world examples of that too. It doesn't just all apply to DFS. It started it was popular in poker and other stuff like that. So just really excited to get into it. Of course, if we make this a regular thing, we'll really be able to touch on some deep points of game theory overall.
Yeah, and I think it applies to every area of life. I mean, hell, let's talk about girls right out the gate.
Right.
The game theory, game is picking up girls. That's when I think game. That's what I think. And, me and you have been out, and our approach is very different than each other's and very different than everyone else's. So, I mean, the way to succeed in every area of life, whether you're running a business, competing, Bill Belichick is probably one of the masters of game theory. I get laid a lot. It's all game theory. It's just doing the things other people aren't willing to do. And a lot of times that you're going to hear us talk about kind of game theory and contrarian and all that kind of stuff, it's really being willing to take risks that other people aren't willing to take too. I think that's a big part of it. And Jeff, I would say, is better than me even in this area of taking very calculated risks. I'll take some kind of crazy outlandish risks that are kind of more all or none. But Jeff has really mastered the art of kind of understanding where the time to be contrarian is and where the time to go chalky is, especially in a sport like NBA. So I want to touch on this slate a little bit. It is a 4-game slate. So I think we should kind of glaze over it at least real quick for 10, 15 minutes max. Did you want to start there or did you want to end there, Jeff?
Let's start there. Let's do that.
Okay, so let's get this out of the way. Like we know, I'm basically focusing on hockey. I mean, I don't think this is fluky right now. I think I'm really just reading the articles. All I did yesterday, I won the triple deke again, hit for $5,000, $5,200 on a $300 entry. 333 total in play. And I just read our articles. I posted it on Twitter. If you scroll through my timeline, you'll see that I referenced Puck Tails and I referenced Nick Rodriguez. They liked Edmonton contrarian. They liked the contrarian goalie. And then they thought this was a chalk play. So I combined it. So I'll maybe even touch on a little bit of what I've been doing in hockey using our, Fantasy Guru Elite articles too. A lot of what we're doing is going to be, kind of universal amongst all sports, and some will be sport specific. But in basketball, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just leaning on Jeff Collins, and I've had success so far this year. So I'm basically just going to kind of go off your article here, Jeff. You guys can find it on the site under articles. It's free to everyone right now. That's going to end next week. So I think October 31st, that's done. So let's start with the point guard position. I see you have listed Ty Lawson and Damian Lillard, and then there's some others you like listed below there. But talk to me a little bit about the point.
It's the deepest position for sure. I felt a little bit guilty listing so many guys. I only wrote up 2 guys, but I listed everyone or most of the guys that I thought were in play. It's like a 4-game slate, and I listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 point guards. I mean, but really it's just that deep. And I know that guys play a lot of lineups. I saw some questions on Twitter, hey, would you guys mind talking about fewer players? It's like, well, I'll tell you which guys I'm more interested in, but since we do have people that are using our advice that play a bunch of lineups and need a lot of differentiation, we are going to still talk about a lot of players. But the guys that I'm most interested in, I think, are Ty Lawson, just because he's so cheap right now, playing a ton of minutes. Doesn't have high usage or anything, but when you're on the court for 30, 35 minutes in an offense like that, you're just going to fall into points, especially a point guard. So Ty Lawson is kind of just one of those value plays that makes a lot of sense today. He's going to be really popular, but if you need to save the position, go there. Damian Lillard, I like in tournaments. The consensus, I think, will be that people think Chris Paul is going to shut him down. You know, Chris Paul is one of the best defensive point guards in the league. There are a lot of metrics to kind of quantify that. One is defensive real plus minus, where he was number one last year by quite a bit. And I think that's the most reliable stat to analyze defensive ability. But Damian Lillard is a guy that we talked about in our previous show that is a little bit better at home. At least last year he was about 10% better at home. And also, I think, shows up for the big games. You saw last year him really show up for his games against Chris Paul. So it wasn't necessarily a case over his career, but we're seeing Damian Lillard really develop into a completely different player, to the point where people call him Steph Curry light. You know, he's like an elite level point guard offensively now. On the defensive end, not so much. But
Steph Curry isn't that great defensively either. So Steph Curry light really isn't that horrible.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. But let me talk about other couple guys. Like Chris Paul is going to be super chalky today, I think, just because of that defense that I just mentioned. So I listed him there because I don't think he's a bad player or anything. I just think he's going to be super popular, so I'm not sure if I'm really going to go that direction. Isaiah Thomas will be a little sneaky, I think, though he did have a good first game. And who else? I mean, I listed Schroeder as a FanDuel play just because he's significantly cheaper there. Rondo is a DK play. It's cheaper over there. There's a really deep position.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, too, you're going to get this a lot. You know, this is the one of the first times you've actually been like really the main sole contributor for content. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's funny because I dealt with this at a couple other companies I was at prior, where you get half the people who are like, dude, narrow it down to just your main 2 or 3 guys. And they don't see the other tweets of the other 100 people going, why did you just list 2 guys? I'm setting 10 lineups. So it's very difficult for us guys. I love the way you're doing it, Jeff. It seems to be fairly similar to what I thought worked in baseball, where, you know, I'm going to highlight the guys. If I'm rating sentences about a guy, obviously I like them the most. And then under others or guys in play, I'm going to list those below it. And it seems like you're doing the same thing. So as far as the optimizer goes, obviously that's another situation where, you know, guys look at the optimizer, and if Jeff has a guy, if you like a guy, like let's say it's give me a point guard today. Let me look at someone here. Let's say you like Schroeder, okay? If you like Schroeder and Jeff's only got him listed as others, but the optimizer's head over heels in love with him and you like him, then play him. But if you like a guy and he's not listed high on the optimizer, he's not listed by Jeff and the others, then it's probably a guy you should lay off. Would you agree, Jeff?
Absolutely. I think that's a really good way to approach it. Also, let's get into the optimizer a little bit too, if we can. Can we do that?
Yeah, we can do whatever we want to.
So I've got a couple questions people like when we're giving feedback about the players that we don't think make sense in the optimizer. And so I ran it just before coming on the show to see if anyone stood out to me. We do have Thomas Satoransky, a guy that I didn't know much about before seeing him in the optimizer, and then dug in quite a bit looking at him. That's a guy I would click off, I think. I think right now the optimizer is valuing rookies a little higher than I would. Yesterday we saw Chris Dunn and Buddy Hield at one point. If you ran the optimizer early, they were in the optimals, but if you ran it later, it ended up filtering them out. So I think that's what's going to be the case with Satoransky right now. Like maybe even by the time we're doing the show right now, he's not in the optimal. I don't know.
Right now, yeah, the optimal.
He's not in anymore. Yeah. Okay. No. So yeah, like I said, it updates every minute. I did it before he came on the show 15 minutes ago, and he's already out. So I would say, just as a general idea, if you're seeing rookies pop up a lot, maybe adjust their projection down a little bit or X them out altogether. Just because it's a good strategy in general in NBA with the unknowns to kind of be careful with them. So yeah, that's kind of just some overall thoughts on the optimizer today.
Yeah, right now it's got Chris. I'll just give it out because it'll probably change. And keep in mind, guys, the optimizer right now, even though it'll change up to lineup lock because it's constantly processing information. And I know a lot of you guys aren't used to that because you're used to working on garbage piece of shit optimizers that basically don't update at all. You want this, especially when late scratches start. This thing is going to be gold. But as of right now, I'm seeing, I'll give you the optimizer right now. If it does change, that doesn't make this a bad lineup. That's the one thing. It's just maybe the other one, the optimizer thinks a little bit better. Right now, it's Chris Paul, Crawford, Markieff Morris, Griffin, Aldridge, Schroeder, Nicholson, and Gasol. So any problem with anyone on that lineup there, Jeff?
Gasol had an awful first game, didn't play a lot of minutes against Golden State there, but that's not going to be the way it is all season or anything. So, that's not awful. I do like building in cash games. I think Paul is smart and Blake Griffin. And then Aldridge, I think, is another good guy. The other guys are kind of just, not guys I wrote up or anything, but could be
nothing that
decent values. So I'd be curious to see if that core stays together, Paul, Griffin, Aldridge, and maybe the value guys change a little bit. But I'm still kind of learning how this thing works too.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, Draymond Green day one, Anthony Davis yesterday, so it has been done. It's Simmons the first day. So it really has been good. Let's move over to shooting guard here so we can save some time for the game theory. Let's buzz through this. At the shooting guard position, I see you have listed Avery Bradley, McCollum as your two main ones, and then you have a little correlation discussion. So we can kind of game theory off this for a second. So give me some talk on Avery Bradley and McCollum, and then let's go game theory route on the next part.
Yeah, McCollum is a guy that I like quite a bit, and I'm not sure how many people are going to use him together with Lillard also, because I think that people are going to find that negatively correlated when you have two guards that are both scorers. Like, usually they're not both going to go off, right? The thing is that makes it okay with this specific pairing is that they stagger their minutes so often, like I talked about that the Warriors are going to do with Curry and Durant, and we saw both of them have good games. When you stagger guys like that, your scorers especially, the usage rate can still stay really high. So you end up with a lot of upside potential still. And I think that today, especially this short slate, absolutely a fine idea to pair McCollum and Lillard in tournaments.
I'm just responding to someone on Twitter right here, Jeff, and I do agree. McCollum, Lillard, definitely great correlation because the game flows through them. Tommy G, trying the NBA optimizer tonight. That shit better work. Now I hope it doesn't. That's a hard comment. But, yeah, and I know you must have subscribed, so I'm still not going to stay off you. But no, and the same token, I know he's probably joking on this, but yeah, we said it yesterday, guys. Keep in mind, you don't judge anyone or anything on a one-game sample size, especially early in the year before the data's out. This thing will get better and better and better and better as the season goes on. So keep that in mind. Just stay with it. And at the same token, if it gets super hot, don't start doubling down, as we told you yesterday. So let's move over to small forward. I see Kawhi and our boy Simmons here. Is this a situation where you're totally fine with these two guys on the same team?
Absolutely. I think in cash games even, it's a great way to hedge a little bit. And you won't hear me talk about hedging much because that's not really my style.
We're not on hashtag team hedge.
Not team hedge, that's for sure.
Double down, bro.
Yeah. So, but in this case, Simmons has plenty of upside either way, I think, judging by what he did against the Warriors. I don't think that was fluky. And if this turns into a blowout where Kawhi all of a sudden needs to sit a little bit, Simmons still should get plenty of run. And that increased usage from him might make up for a little bit of what Leonard isn't doing in the fourth quarter. So I think it's actually a pretty sharp hedge play right there in cash games on FanDuel, even just to go Kawhi and Simmons there. So I'm playing around with that in my current cash game lineup.
Okay, cool. Power forward, Blake Griffin, Ed Davis, I see you got listed. You also talking about DeAndre Jordan as a leverage play. We're going to be talking about leverage plays in a second, but again, decent time to dovetail and kind of tease that.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying that I like DeAndre as a leverage play. I'm saying if people don't agree with me that Blake Griffin is going to be good and they want to fade him just because he's going to be so chalky, that's where Blake Griffin's production is going to go probably. It would end up being DeAndre Jordan gets some pick and roll opportunities and takes away a little bit of the usage from Griffin. I mean, usage might not be the right word because DeAndre Jordan isn't like a ball dominant player, of course, but might take a couple extra points away from Griffin. So I do like Griffin a lot here. Ed Davis is more of like a tournament play. Just a high upside player when he gets enough minutes, averaged 25.5 minutes against the Clippers in this matchup last year, ended up with 31.3 DK points, and he's like 4K or 3,800, something like that. So that's just a lot of upside for a guy that's really cheap. That would be, and I think it's going to be pretty low owned too. I don't think anyone wants to play Ed Davis.
Yeah, and I think we should touch on this too. So I'm basically just what the optimizer spitting out right now. I just want your take on a couple guys. Just so people who are looking, because I'm getting the tweets on Twitter. We already spoke about some of the rookies and stuff, but it's showing I'm seeing Nicholson in here right now, Andrew Nicholson at forward. Any interest in him at all? He's $3,000, so obviously he doesn't need to do much to pay off value. Got a fairly high projection. They got him projected, Andrew Nicholson, at 7x.
Man, I mean, I guess that's a guy I need to look into more, but no, I'm not in love with that. Of course, like you said, the price is so cheap that he doesn't need much to pay off. And I know that the optimizer values getting those expensive guys in the lineup, so they take some chances with the lower price guys, and it's been working so far this season. So, I understand it. It's just not a guy in my lineups or anything.
Gotcha. And we missed Jamal Crawford would be the other one that I don't see listed on yours that is coming out in the optimal. Any field, 3,600 seems very cheap for Jamal Crawford, right?
Sure, he's a guy. Yeah, for sure. I've more focused on FanDuel so far, but on DraftKings, that's a fair price for Crawford. I like Redick a little bit. Also, you figure guards are going to do really well in this game. Portland has Lillard and McCollum, two guys we talked about as great DFS options tonight, but they don't play defense, so you could take guys against them as well. Pretty much any Clipper guard I'm not going to say no to.
Okay, cool. I got a tweet saying, why is Tommy G drinking water and not beer? Because I'm a real human, and I'm not like every other fake ass fucking douchebag trying to be me on other shows who just has a beer next to him because they want to look cool drinking beer, and they're going to fucking throw half of it away at the end of the show. I'm not in the mood to drink beer right now, so I'm drinking water because I'm a real fucking human being. But keep watching all the other shows where they're like, oh, I got a beer here. Meanwhile, it's probably fucking orange water. So many people trying to be us, Jeff. It's fucking insane. So let's go over to I'm cool. I have a Bud Light. So I used to drink beer on all my shows because I was literally drunk on all my shows, and I will be on a lot of these. If I'm gonna drink a beer, I'm gonna get fucking shitted. Let's go over to a center position here. Who we liking at the C spot?
I like DeMarcus Cousins a lot. He's expensive today, which might scare some people away. That in the matchup against the Spurs, of course, but Cousins is just one of the highest upside players in all of fantasy basketball. We've seen it early on in the year that all of these high upside players are paying off early on. We saw it with LeBron. With
early NBA, it looks like a little bit like early football, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Yeah, LeBron but NBA you expect it. Right. Football you don't. LeBron Durant yesterday, even Westbrook, James Harden, Anthony, like all of these elite guys are paying off. I'm not saying that's a reason to take Cousins. I'm just saying like these elite guys obviously have ridiculous potential. So I like him a lot. Howard is a guy that might be under the radar for some people. And then for other people that have been following like the offseason and everything, he might be a little too overhyped because there's a lot of talk about how he is happy in his hometown now. He's having fun again, and that's why he's playing really well. He did really well in the preseason. So people just blowing that up. I don't know how much value I put into that, but that's something that's not going to be quantified in an optimizer anywhere. So I noted him there as a guy that I'm somewhat interested in early in the season, at least. This is a super moody guy that if something goes wrong, all of a sudden he's going to have a bad season again. So we'll see.
I compared Dwight Howard to Cam Newton. I know you guys don't like the comparison. You don't believe in the comparison. I won't speak for you. I got in trouble for that yesterday. But I know a lot of people out there in the Twitterverse love Cam Newton. But I'm telling you, everyone forgets that Cam Newton was a little whiny fucking bitch for a long time before he became, a quarterback who was winning 12 games plus a year. And now all of a sudden he's a whiny bitch again. He was a whiny bitch at the Super Bowl, and Dwight Howard's the same way. I don't care how much you smile when things are going well. I care how much you smile when the team needs you to smile because their heads are down, and that's not Dwight Howard. So I think he is going to be a lot dependent on how the team does too, not only how his personal performance is. But that's good. We got through NBA in about 20 minutes, so we still got about 40 minutes left for game theory and stuff, so it's going to be good. If you guys want to tweet at us, I'm going to be I'm looking at the Twitter feed here. The one thing I will tell you about Twitter, me and Jeff are very transparent, and the only reason we're transparent is because we keep our stuff behind the paywall. That's one of the main reasons Jeff came over. It's one of the main things he wanted to make sure was in his contract, that if I'm going to be unloading the clip of information on everyone and not holding back, I want to make sure it's only for subscribers. And I don't want this on Twitter. I don't want this on free videos. So this week NBA is free. So we're unloading.
And I'm not happy about that either, but we're still doing it. Yeah. From a business perspective, I get it. But I'm not thrilled that right now we're doing free content for everyone. So
I know you're not. And I'm against it too. I always feel the first week of the sports, we got to let people see how amazing you are, darling, so that they come and sign up and buy our products. So what we will do, though, guys, I wrote it in my article last week saying if you're going to reference a player in my article on Twitter, just say, Tommy, running back number 3. Would you play him over running back number 5? It's the same thing. Right now it's fine, but I am seeing some tweets for the last 3 days. The optimizer said to play this guy. Should I be careful, guys? You're spending a lot of money on these services. A lot of you are spending $100 to $200, a season for this stuff. You write something and tag me in it with 20,000 followers, and now all of a sudden I respond. It's not your 80 people that are going to see it. It's my 20,000. And now all 20,000 people, 19,000 of which or 12,000 of which, whatever the number is, might not have the optimizer going, ooh, I got a free play. And they'll piece that together little by little through your tweets. So
and there goes your edge.
Yeah, and then it kills you. And I don't give a fuck. I'm a hockey guy, right? But it kills you guys. You're giving away the picks you paid for. So be very, very careful with that. All right, let's get into some game theory, Jeff. So where do you want to start with this? There's so many places we can go. I think we should start with NBA and kind of how it differs from other sports as far as being contrarian. I think that's a thing that people are going to struggle with initially, coming off baseball, coming off hockey and football. What about NBA? What's the best way to go about being contrarian in NBA?
It's a good question. I'm getting some feedback on your end, just so you know. It might be
okay. I don't know whose side it might be. I'm actually in an undisclosed location right now, so I'll be out of here tomorrow.
There we go. It's fixed now. So, good question. How to be contrarian in NBA? I think that finding leverage plays is a thing, just like it is in other sports. We talk about in football, if you are going to fade a running back that maybe as a leverage play, if the running back isn't going to have a good game, team's probably still going to put up some points. So how are they going to put up points? Probably in the passing game, right? So you take the passing game instead, and you kind of double down that way. You do that for really high scoring games where it's you want exposure to that game, but you don't want to take the chalkiest option. You did that with the Saints the other week, right? You faded Drew Brees when he was chalky and then went with Ingram.
Yeah, and this is relative to all sports, I think. And leverage play, because we're going to use a lot of terminology that you guys may not fully understand. And the reason that I want to kind of take a second to explain it isn't because I think you guys are dumb. It's because some people might not just know the vernacular of it. So what a leverage play is basically in normal situations, and Jeff, you might be able to explain it better than me. I'll give you an example in NFL. Drew Brees and Brandon Cooks are chalk. The Saints have a team total of 30. They're going to score points on San Fran. I'm fading Drew Brees and Brandon Cooks. I know the Saints are going to score points. So as a leverage play, I'm going to play Mark Ingram because I'm basically saying if those points come from my guy, then I'm not only getting my points, but I'm actually, the other side is hurting. So it's kind of it's almost a double down in some situations, right? Right, Jeff?
Sure. And in NBA, I'll give an NBA example. I've used this one a lot because it was one of my first big days in NBA DFS. Early on in my career, I played. So you guys know how James Harden is super chalky right now because he's handling the ball a ton. There's a period a couple years ago where it was the same situation where everyone knew Harden was going to have a good game. It's like a Westbrook situation where everyone was on him. In this particular queue, he was 85% owned, and I knew he was going to be super highly owned, so I faded him. Reason being, Chris Paul was in that game. He was going to be guarding him. We talked about Chris Paul already on this show, but he's a really good defender, and I had found some information and watched the games to see that Chris Paul had a decent chance of covering Harden that game, so that not that Harden was going to get completely shut down, but his overall production wasn't going to be amazing. Ended up that he actually did completely shut James Harden down, which was huge for me because I took all of the other scorers in that game for the Rockets. And when Harden didn't have a good game, in a basketball game, think about it. They're not just not going to score any points. They're still going to score 90 to 110 points, especially in a matchup like that was projected to have a 225 total or something. But yeah, guys like Ariza and Josh Smith at the time, and those sort of guys are who I loaded up on, and they all went off. So I passed up 85% of the field with a leverage play of fading Harden and having all the other guys that were going to get his points instead. So that's basically what a leverage play is in basketball.
Yeah, I mean, and we have it in all the sports, but I think basketball would be the one where maybe they're not as obvious who the leverage plays are because the points really can be distributed amongst a large quantity of people. Whereas in other sports, in football, if a team scores a touchdown, they're only going to score about 3 of those a game. So if you could vulture 2 of those with your play, you're really killing the other side. So it's a little bit different in basketball. I do think the correlation plays is another term that we need to kind of explain to people. Correlation plays would be kind of on a double down on some level too, where a correlation play in football would be to correlate your wide receiver 1 with your quarterback, right? So, if Ben Roethlisberger goes absolutely ballistic, then Antonio Brown has to go ballistic. That would be a correlation play. In basketball, it's more kind of, I look at it at least, and you're the expert on this, so I look at it more kind of point guard and big man situation on the assist side, or point guard and shooter. How would you basically describe the correlation plays in NBA, and which are the best ones?
That's a good way to generalize it. I think that pick and roll combos are one of the big things I look at to get some correlation. I've explained that a few times before on previous shows, but again, it's about getting a guy or 2 guys that are going to be working together a lot and passing the ball to each other a lot, and resulting in you getting a 1.5 for the assist and the 2 points or 3 points from the other player all in one play. That happens a lot, and it's about knowing which players work well together. Steph Curry and Draymond Green last year were a great combo because Draymond Green doesn't rely on a huge scoring game to go off, whereas Steph Curry does. So Draymond Green can do all of the little things like the rebounds and the blocks and the steals and even the assists, while Steph Curry goes off and scores a huge game. Whereas a lot of people are playing the Splash Brothers together, where Clay relies on a lot of scoring, and so does Steph. So it takes a little more for that combo to go off. Not that it never does, but it's a little less likely to go off. And a question on Twitter we got opening night was, hey, was it bad that I played Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant? And I would say, yeah, and theoretically, yeah, that is kind of a bad play because those guys play a lot with each other on the floor, and they're both going to be pretty scoring reliant. So that's not the first combo I would think of. If you want 2 scorers from that team, you want Steph and Durant because they're playing separately, kind of like what we talked about with Lillard and McCollum again, that they're staggering the rotations to where both of those guys can have upside.
And when they're in, there's going to be a lot of Steph Curry passing to Durant too. Sure. So even when they're on the court at the same time, you're going to get that. One of the things to mention to kind of tie hockey into it, I think hockey is the biggest correlation sport of them all, to the point where if you're not correlating, you're literally almost guaranteed a loss. By correlating in hockey, it's obviously you're going to play lines. So the line correlation between the centerman, the winger, and even a defenseman, you could play the full 3 guys on the line, or you could play a defender with 2 offensemen, which is a strategy that I like best. The reason for that being there's usually 2 assists per goal. So if someone on that line scores, it's usually at least one, if not 2 of his line mates who are also compiling points. So you're really kind of stacking in a sense there, Jeff.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about that because I'm trying to learn how to play NHL a little bit too. Seeing your success, I just get jealous seeing your screenshots every night.
It's just that you think if my dumb ass can do it, anyone can do it. So you're like, I'm going to jump in.
No, I think
1,000%. I could definitely be up 1,000%.
No, when you explain what you're doing to me, I'm like, oh wow, that's yeah, that makes sense. It's probably not fluky that you're winning. So with the lines though and stacking everyone, there's 2 different ways to do it, right? You could take the number 1 line, or you could take the number 1 power play line. What's more important, having the power play exposure or like the first line because I imagine they get the most ice time, or what is it?
There's a couple great sites out there, which I'll give next month once we go, because this is free right now. I don't want to give all those sites and stuff that I use. I will next month. I know a lot of you have been asking for my hockey content, and I'll be doing it with Andy and Nick. I'll be doing some stuff, maybe even starting some shows with them. But there's a couple of sites on there that kind of show what percentage of the time a lot of these lines are on the ice. So some teams kind of favor their front line a lot more, whereas you're playing second line guys who have less minutes on ice. So that's kind of stuff I've been looking at that you don't need to be a hockey expert. You always want the power play guys, just for the simple fact that those are going to be the easiest scoring opportunities. They're a man up, obviously, in those situations. So you're most of the time trying to find guys on the first line and the power play line, even if they play on different main lines. The power play is the first thing you're looking at, and then the other lines after. But a good way to get contrarian is to take second line guys. That's one thing that I like doing. Or if you have a team with a short slate with a crazy high team total, where they're expected to score the most goals by far, take 2 guys from the first line, 2 guys from the second line on that same team. That's won me some good money too.
What about defensemen? Is the correlation there important with trying to make sure they're on the same lines as guys, or do you ever what's the position that you feel like you can single out guys sometimes?
I would say with defensemen, it's very team specific, just because there's different type. Defenders, the one spot where there's a lot of guys up at $8,000, like Burns, right? You played Burns the first night you played. Right?
Yeah.
Brent Burns is defenseman, but I mean, this guy literally plays on the ice, takes the most shots on the team. So he's really like having a centerman at defenseman. So yeah, someone like that, you're definitely going to correlate them. And then the problem with defense though, is you have the most $2,700 guys too. So when you build your lines, that's where you could find the most value. It's very similar to point guard, I think, in NBA, where in point guard, you got the Steph Currys and you have a lot of these guys, Russell Westbrook, who are the best plays. But also, if you get any type of injury or scratch, a cheap point guard is going to be guaranteed the ball in his hands. So it's a tough call between, do I go to the top and to the bottom? What I have done on defense, I've rarely gone to the middle. So there's a hint. I rarely am in that kind of $4,000 to $6,000 range. I'm either up at the 7th guys, the Burns, or I'm down at the low guys to fill in my roster. But yeah, it's team dependent, and we will talk about that too. I want to ask you a question as far as leverage plays involving blowouts. This is something that I did have a little success with, where let's say opening night. Granted, the game didn't blow out in the direction that Jeff would have hoped it did, but everyone and their mother was like, Goldman's still, sorry to bring that up, Jeff. Jeff's a Warriors fan, for those of you that don't know. I'm so happy you fucking lost that game. But take that bandwagon and just take all the way. You should be happy too, honestly, as a Golden State fan from NorCal, right? You know how many bandwagon Golden State fans there are? Get all them off. Just throw them off the wagon. Let them jump on some other wagon.
I had season tickets when we were awful, in the really bad years.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who are repping Warriors right now. I'm like, you didn't even know who they were 5 years ago. Shut the fuck up. But as far as leverage plays and blowouts, a way that I went on my roster that I said is I played Simmons and Patty Mills. Okay. Granted, Patty Mills did okay. It didn't work out as well because I knew I was fading Steph Curry and I was fading some of the Warriors. So basically my play was
hey, hold on. You can't be mad at Patty Mills. Patty Mills had a great game for his.
That he didn't play. You gave me, he did have a good game. I was just pissed he didn't play in the last 5 minutes. I thought he would be on the court at the end and blow up from where he was.
Gotcha.
But that's like a leverage play, because if I know everyone's going on the Warriors, I'm basically saying, all right, I'm fading them. Let's pray it blows out. They lose all their Warriors with 8 minutes left in the game. I get all my free Patty Mills and Simmons points at that point. It worked out anyway, but it just didn't go to. So do you do that a lot in NBA? Do you use the blowout leverage?
Oh, absolutely, especially on the short slates. That's a great way to really get some leverage. Last year with the Warriors specifically, since they played in so many blowouts, and on Thursday night, like in the short slates, Maurice Bates was a really good guy to use because he was like their garbage guy, super high usage player at the end of games, and basically didn't even pass, just would shoot every time. He was a big dude that even started to take a bunch of threes as well. So like those sort of things, if you can find a high usage player that comes in with the bench guys and is going to be a bench guy that plays at the end of the game, because not all bench guys just automatically play in the blowout. So you got to find the garbage guys. You can find a guy like that in a situation where a game could do a blowout, but people are kind of forced into those players. Beautiful.
Yeah. And, we talked about leverage plays. We talked about correlation plays. We're going to get into more of this. If you guys want, the easiest way to do this, because I'm getting a lot of tweets from you guys right now, and they're great. Keep them coming. We're going to try and answer them. Watching the game theory may have missed out. Do you plan a hockey optimizer? Yes, we do plan a hockey optimizer. That'll be out shortly. We're actually having that worked on right now. Believe it or not, and the optimizer is very expensive. And, we were a startup a month and a half ago. So everyone's like, where's your app? Where's your this? I'm like, guys, we basically started this, like me and Kevin, started this out of our pocket. So luckily we've blown the doors off and we have, over 5,000 subscribers and everything now. So now we have more money thanks to you guys. And the first thing we're doing is we're putting this money back into the company. So we're working deals to get the optimizers for every sport. We're hiring more people. That's why we were able to bring Jeff on, because of our hot start, and subs and stuff. So we are dumping this money back in. So this company is going to look nothing like what it is right now 2 months from now, because we got a lot planned. We got some things planned that me and Jeff were talking about last night that no one in the industry is doing. So we'll have chats, we'll have all that kind of stuff, but we want to make sure we do it right out the gate. We don't want to do what other companies do and kind of fumble around and fuck it up 40 times until they get it right. So we want everything that we're doing to be right and accurate. But as far as fades, Jeff, that's one thing that I did. Oh, I was going to tell you guys, put hashtag Game Theory Thursday. That'll be easier for me to just sort through the questions, because I get a ton of fucking notifications that go like this. So if I could just stay on the hashtag Game Theory Thursday, then I could just answer all the questions. So any game theory questions you guys have, hit us with it. We got 25 minutes left, so we'll touch on it. But let's talk a little bit about fading, Jeff. This is one of our specialties. I think this might be the thing that has made me the most money in DFS, fading properly. A lot of times I know what to do and I ignore it in certain situations just because I'm very not risk averse at all due to my financial situation. But let's talk about someone who's got just a normal bankroll, who's trying to grind out money, but they still want to play some GPPs and fade in NBA. What are some examples of some of the right situations to fade and some of the really dangerous situations to fade?
That's super hard to generalize, but I will say that when I mean this may sound kind of obvious, but when ownership gets extremely high on guys, like I was talking about Harden at 85% owned, I'm going to fade most guys at that ownership percentage, even in NBA where he's probably going to reach that and everything. It's like, if you can find any reason to fade the guy at those kind of ownerships, you do it. The other reason would be if you could find a decent leverage play. My favorite thing to do is something that's come up twice now already in the season. I pointed it out both times. Klay Thompson, opening day, a shooting-dependent player that was going to be chalky. That's the perfect guy to try and fade, because if his shot's not falling, he's not going to have a good game. And then Devin Booker again last night. I pointed him out as essentially the same type of player as Klay Thompson, and he didn't have a good shooting night either. So I think highly owned shooting guards that don't do a lot of peripheral stuff like rebounds and assists and are just mainly relying on particularly the outside shot, that's the perfect fade.
Yeah, and one of the things I had a lot of success with. Now, keep in mind, whenever you're fading, you're normally fading a good play. You can't fade Schroeder tonight. You're just not playing Schroeder tonight, because he's not the chalk. But, when we're talking about fading a guy, we're usually talking about fading a guy who's either got an extremely high expected outcome or a guy who's going to be extremely highly owned. So in those situations in NBA, again, I'm not an NBA expert. I have qualified for 4 NBA finals, so I've had some success with it. But the big thing about NBA for me personally, being a little crazy, is I like to fade high-owned, foul-prone bigs. Those are the guys where you can get bailed out a lot. If you look at a lot of these guys who are very foul-prone, I'm not in NBA mode right now, but I think it was Drummond or, a couple of these guys. Yeah. Literally within a minute of the game, they can get 2 fouls and bang, you hit the nuts. The danger is if they're in that great of a matchup where they're 50% owned, bigs have very reliable and predictable point outcomes. So if they don't get in foul trouble, you could be in a lot of trouble running against a 65-point day. But what do you think of that, Jeff?
No, that's I'm glad you pointed that out, because I wasn't thinking of it at the time, but that's certainly something that I use and some sharp people use. Jokic is a guy that comes to mind. I pointed out yesterday that he could get a bunch of fouls in the first 8 minutes or something, and all of a sudden he's not going to be a good play, but he's a super high point per minute guy. So anytime you see a guy like Jokic as chalk, or I think that one, I'd have to double check this to make sure, but I think Cousins against Zaza Pachulia, for whatever reason, picks up a bunch of fouls and gets frustrated. So he's a decent fade in that. I'll point that out if it comes up, when it comes up. But there's guys like that where it's like certain players get under a guy's skin and they're not as productive or have a higher bust rate. I'll say bust rate a lot, like when I'm talking about guys that have a lower probability of reaching value. But yeah, I think that's a really sharp thing you just pointed out.
Yeah, and you could go Google it, guys. I mean, there's a bunch of different places you can go find, personal fouls per 36 minutes, and then you can kind of look at some of the names on there because normally, now players do evolve and players do get better. But I remember Kyle O'Quinn was a guy who, when he was getting, a lot of burn and he was really cheap, was a guy that I was always okay to fade just because he plays like a bull and he could be fouled out very quickly or at least get in foul trouble. But you can go online and look for these things. Most of the names on that list from last year, if you're looking at Nurkic, if you're looking at Kyle O'Quinn, if you're looking at, a lot of these guys, Sacre, the fouls per 36, if they're foulers, they're pretty much foulers most of their career. That's not going to vary that much from year to year. But, young players, maybe you'll see them evolve, but especially guys that have been in the league 3 or 4 years. Another thing that I think is very dangerous to fade, Jeff, and I did this too much last year in NBA. I want your take on it. Value point guards, guys that are literally min price. The point guard, Rajon Rondo's out, the backup comes in, and he's going to be getting 30 minutes at, min price. Those are very dangerous fades because they're not going to foul out and the ball's always in their hand.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. The only exception is if maybe it is a scoring dependent point guard, but if you're dealing with mainly a guy that is going to be able to do a little bit of everything, it's really hard for that guy, if he's going to play 35 minutes, to not fall into reaching value at min price, So it's literally the toughest fade, I think, is a point guard with decent usage at min price. With Ty Lawson today, he's not an extreme high usage guy. It is conceivable that you could fade the guy because he's not necessarily got as much upside and as high of a floor. But that said, I still wrote him up because point guards that are getting a bunch of minutes usually are going to pay off.
Yep. Yeah, it's very similar to, Booker this week for the Denver Broncos. That's the scariest fade if you're going to fade this week because he's going to get carries. He's going to have opportunity, can produce in a bunch of different ways, whether it's running or through the passing game. And, that's another thing. I want to touch on one thing before we get to some of the Twitter questions here. We got a bunch of them. Keep them coming in, guys. We got some really good questions up there. I'll get to those in a second. As far as blowouts, NBA is the one sport more than any other sport where blowouts will kill you for the simple fact that people go, blowouts happen in every sport. Yes, but in order for an NFL team to blow out and bench people, they already have 35 points, which means their starters already should be at max production or beyond max production because no team totals are 35, 40 points. That's one thing. In baseball, you're looking for 4 to 5 at-bats out of your player. If the team's up 12-0 in the 6th inning, even if they get yanked in the 7th, they already got their 5 at-bats. You got your full total, and they were probably very productive. The problem with NBA, because players don't just play straight through, that if this is a blowout at the end of the 3rd quarter, you miss those valuable 8 minutes or 6 minutes of court time. So how do you factor blowouts in? Do you factor the Vegas lines in when making your decisions a lot? I know this is kind of a controversial topic and hard to predict.
I would say I do it far less than most. I don't want to say sharps necessarily, but most guys that do this regularly. Just because, say, Vegas is right around the number, it's very rare that a team's going to be favored by double digits. So say a team loses by double digits, by 12 points or something. But usually a team loses by 12 points, that's pretty competitive until the last couple minutes of the game. So where you run into trouble is if it's like a 20-point game. And that's just super hard to predict. Of course, with the Warriors, they're kind of changing that. I'm sure there'll be in plenty of spots this year where you're thinking that, yeah, it's obvious that this game's going to be over in the first 3 quarters. But that's where you kind of have to use your projection of ownership along with the probability of that happening and figure out, okay, everyone's fading the Warriors because they're playing the Sixers tonight. Do I want to be the guy that's not going to have any Warriors exposure just because they're afraid of the blowout? Or do I want to get these guys at a discounted ownership percentage and then a really good matchup. It's going to be a constant battle of figuring out, weighing ownership versus probability, just like everything else. So it's hard to just give a general answer, but
I don't think there is a general answer, because this is why you guys want to subscribe, honestly. Because night by night, we're going to be breaking this stuff down. Mostly Jeff, but I'll be doing it for the other sports too. But it depends on the certain situations. For instance, at the beginning of the season, you're not going to see players rest as much because of a blowout, because the fans are all excited. Might be the team's first home game or two. They're going to let these guys run probably a little bit more early on. Whereas if we get into 2-3 months from now, it also depends when you're trying to say, okay, this team's a 15-point underdog. Do I want to roster anyone from the favorites in this game? Let's say it's the Warriors, knowing it could be a blowout. Well, the question is, are they in the middle of a 4-game and 4-night stretch? Are they on a back-to-back? Is this a situation where they have a big game coming up in 2 days? Because if those teams are tired or they have another game tomorrow or just played the night before, then you'll have a higher propensity of these guys being sat down earlier in a 12, 13-point game. Whereas if they haven't played for 2 days, then they might run it straight through for the full, with 4 minutes left. So I think that's important, Jeff, and you'll be touching on that throughout the season.
Yeah, I'll actually break down exactly how players perform by days of rest too. That's one of the things we can do with StatMuse is I can ask it questions like, how many DraftKings points does Derrick Rose score by days of rest, and it'll tell me on 2 days of rest he averages this much throughout his career and this much throughout the last 2 seasons and that sort of thing. And it's like most people aren't looking at that kind of stuff, but it's going to give our subscribers a huge edge. I've kind of, I've teased some of that stuff that we're going to be showing everyone, but I want to keep a lot of that under wraps until all the freeloaders are out of the picture. I don't want like the masses of people to get the edge in that sense. So
my thing is, I don't want the other companies copying what we're about to do.
Yeah, well, they're going to, but hopefully they can, we delay what they're going to be doing.
We'll do it with everything else. We'll just do it better.
Exactly. Anything you do well is going to get copied. So it's just, it's fine, but we'll do it better because we know what we're doing, And
because we're better. So let's go here. Let me see. Was Anthony Davis popping in the algorithm yesterday? Yes, all day. I ran it at noon and he was in it. And then I know people had it at 6:55 and he was in it. There might have been
a period.
There were
a couple people that didn't, but yeah, I ran it twice and it was on the optimizer. So,
I know it was on for me on DraftKings the whole time. I didn't check FanDuel. So I don't know if he popped on the FanDuel one. But here's another trick, guys. And again, we're going to get used to the optimizer because this is the most elite optimizer in the industry, like without a doubt. I'll put this up against anyone, and if anyone from any other site is watching, which I'm sure you guys are, because half of you subscribe to our service. But if you guys want to put yours up against ours, I'll put it up against it any day. The problem with this is it is such a living, being, breathing creature that it's going to change a lot. Like I said, the other plays aren't bad. The optimals that come out right now aren't bad. They're just maybe a little bit less. Like you're talking this much difference between the new one that'll come out at tip and now. One of the things I think I'm going to do, Jeff, tell me if you think this is nuts. I'm going to run it at 12, and then I'm going to run it at like 3, and then I'm going to run it at 6, and I'm going to run it at 6:30. I don't want to get too close to tip. And then I'm going to see which guys are in every single one of those runs. Because I'm sure there's going to be about 4 or 5 core that's in every one, and those are going to be my core that then I'm going to build around. I think that's a good way to kind of play with it for right now.
Sure. One more thing, too, about the optimizer. You can look at the projected points, too, and just figure out, okay, well, what are the players that the optimizer likes the most? Like you can manually just eyeball it and go, wait, well, they like this guy for this many points. Obviously, that's a really good play. You don't have to, like, click the button to optimize to see which plays are good that day.
Right, of course. And as we did before, on the other show, let me just make sure I have nothing. Hold on. I'm going to hide my stuff here because I got some open conversation.
That's a horrible idea. This is going to backfire so bad one time.
I succeeded the first time, so I'm getting cocky now. But let's screen share this. There we go. Okay, so do you see my optimizer screen?
I saw myself for a little bit, but yeah, now I see it.
Now you see yourself. Okay, now you see the optimizer screen? Yeah, and again, like we said, guys, just to show you again, in case any of you missed it before, you could sort all these by value. So if you go here to all and click value, you're seeing right there. This is the one that Jeff said. I mean, Jerry Sandusky. I don't know about this guy right here, but
That's
yeah, I don't know if you want to play this guy. He likes playing with balls though, so maybe his.
oh, I should have just let that go and then let it die. But
these that Thomas is playing with, but yeah, like if Jeff is saying, if you don't want this guy in, just boop, get him out. Delaney, get him out. All right, and now we're getting to some names that maybe we're a little more familiar with there. You could also sort it by projected. You could sort it by ceiling. Ceiling would be guys with more upside. Floor would be guys that with, this will show their downside, right? So that's how you could do it there. And then risk. So obviously the guys with the lowest risk totals, like you're seeing down here, are usually the biggest names. Kawhi Leonard, Al Horford, Cousins. That means that, so these would be more cash game. You could go right up to here, guys. I'm sure you could still see this, I'm hoping. And click on filters. And if you're playing cash games, make this your own. Try it. Put a bunch of free lineups in tournaments and see what's working and stuff too. So let's say I want to play cash games and I don't want anyone with a risk over 5. I could change that right there and then optimize. And this will show me a lot of the guys with higher floors. You'll notice you're going to recognize all these names. These aren't going to be people that you've never heard of or rookies. These are guys who have a little bit of a higher floor. So there's some ways to use that effectively and, really take advantage of it. I don't know how to get the screen share off, so I'm going to let you talk right now, Jeff, while I figure this out.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing, the guy who runs the optimizer or runs the model just texted me to say that it's about to get a big update in a minute. So check back on the optimizer in a little bit, and I think you're going to see it change quite a bit. Make sure you haven't completely locked in your lineups yet. Another thing is, we're talking about how our optimizer compares to the other optimizers in the industry. And I know why ours is better. Like, there's definite reasons why the other optimizers are struggling compared to ours. I'm not going to say what those reasons are.
Either. I know 3 too. Me and Jeff are privy to inside information on, and we're privy to inside information, which we'll never share if you're listening out there from any of these other companies. We won't share it, of people that you're already paying for who tried to buy our optimizer and didn't realize that we already had it. So, we're not going to share all this. We're not rats. I don't mind picking
People think we're just being salesmen. Like, I told a couple of my buddies that, like,
I am so anti-algos and optimizers. And if you notice, because when I found out what it's doing, I look at it more as a human, rather than an optimizer. I don't look at this as a robot because I can't tell you why, but there's reasons why this is a living, breathing organism, as I keep telling you, and not just a computer punching data.
And it's still not going to win every day.
But it's going to win 80% of the day. It's going to win.
No,
it's going to win more than it loses, and you're going to make money at the end of the year. That's the bottom line.
Exactly.
And listen, we didn't pay Jeff all this money and bring him on board and make him a partner for you to just lean on an optimizer either. So, you got Jeff Collins sitting here who's proven already for 4, 5, 6 years that he's going to qualify for all the live finals. He's going to be in there. He's going to have monster nights. So, use them in combination. It's good. It's like you get a hot blonde and a hot brunette, fuck them both. Don't just pick one. Have a threesome.
Which one am I?
You'd be the blonde. So okay. Having sex with one girl is so 2015. I don't understand why people still do that. Let's go through this. We can go a little bit long, but I don't want to go very long because you got lineups to set. So let's bang through some of these Twitter questions. Thoughts on Matt Barnes having a 6X game last night? Is that his role, or is it because it was a blowout? That's from Joe SK I Love.
Yeah, it's not going to be – you can't expect a huge year from Matt Barnes, I don't think. He'll be fine in spots, just like we saw him fine in spots last year with Memphis, like when there are injuries and everything. And when he's playing in a limited role, any sort of limited role, I'm not going to be super high on the guy.
Yeah, so you're saying a little more of an aberration than it is something we can count on. This is from Kurt_Steinacher. Do you pick differently in single-entry GPP compared to multi-entry GPP? 100%. I mean, I think in single-entry GPPs, you could be a little less contrarian because you got to remember everyone's putting their best foot forward. And you're going to see guys chalk be higher owned in single-entry GPPs, whereas in multi-entry GPPs, those same guys are putting in 50 lineups, 100 lineups, so they're diversifying and weakening the field, actually. You agree, Jeff?
Absolutely. You want to take more risks the bigger the field is.
Just to give you a little game theory note here, this question I get a lot. Tommy, I'm playing a 10-man. Tommy, I'm playing a 50-man, a 100-man. Do I play it like a cash game or not? It's a little bit depending on what you want, what you're looking to get out of that tournament in that specific situation. But for me personally, I play 15 mans like a GPP. I just don't go as crazy. The way I'll look at it, let's say in a normal large field GPP, I personally, being very, very non-risk averse, I would say I'm going to play 3 chalk players and 5 contrarian plays in a large field GPP, right? Let's say that's me. Well, once I go down to like 500 people, I'm going to make that 4 and 4. Once I go down to 150 people, I'm going to make that 5 and 3 the other way. Once I get down to a 15-man, it's probably 6 and 2. So I'm going to slide the scale down depending on the size. We'll go deeper into it, and we're going to have a lot of ways to communicate with you guys directly shortly, which I can't share just yet. But it's different.
Yeah, the big thing with that too is if you're playing in a 10-man, think about it this way: the lowest percent owned player possible is going to be 10%. So you need to not even worry about 1% players compared to 10%, right? Which is what we're doing in the Sunday Million and those sort of contests. Is we're thinking, okay, I'm going to need like a 1% player or 1 or 2 1% players to try to win this thing. In the 10-mans, you don't need a 1% player. You can look at like the guys that are going to be a little bit lower owned that you think are going to be 10% owned, and that's the same advantage you get by playing what you'd perceive to be a 1% owned guy in a bigger tournament. So people need to think about ownership percentage that way.
And to put it in a baseball perspective, one of the things I like to do that I had a lot of success with in the really large field GPPs, let's say I rank out my 5 favorite stacks. In the large fields, I might go to my 5th or 6th favorite stack. In a 15-person tournament, I'm going to go to my 2nd or 3rd favorite stack. So I don't need to go as deep. So that's what Jeff's talking about. You got your list of projected totals here. You don't have to go all the way down to the bottom of the list. The shorter the field, the shorter your list. All right. So good question, though. Let's go here. Monday, Thursday, NFL slate, for example. Looking pretty good GPP-wise. I know Murray will be high owned. Should I pivot off? This kind of ties into game theory here as far as if you're happy with where you're at, if you're trying to win it, then you got to look at the people above you, obviously. But if you're happy where you're at and you're looking for a cash and you're looking pretty good, then stay on what you started with. Stick with what got you there. The time to really pivot in those situations is when you're chasing someone down, like for a Q, when you're in 10th place and the guy in first has, more minutes than you. Then you're going to go Kendall Wright instead of Allen Robinson. Then you're going to go Chris Ivory instead of DeMarco Murray. But if you like your position and you're in a position of power, stick with the guys that got you there. You don't have to worry about ownership. Everyone else does because you're in the lead. Right, Jeff?
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. All right. How do you guys recognize chalk players so quickly being an every night sport? Jeff, I'll let you start this and I'll give my 2 cents.
With NBA, for one, you can just look at the easiest matchups and know that those guys are going to be highly owned. 2, go on Twitter and see who everyone's talking about, who everyone is guaranteeing is going to have a good night. Those guys are going to be highly owned usually. It's just kind of something that you'll learn as you play more NBA DFS. Like, you just know which guys are obvious values that people aren't going to miss. And then you'll find some other guys, like I think Ed Davis tonight, that people probably aren't going to be super high on. Like, could be a super chalky guy later in the season if he's performing like this, but right now, just for whatever reason, isn't going to be on most people's radar. So you just kind of learn as you go.
And honestly, that's why you pay us. That I can teach you a lot of things, and I've said this on Sirius. I can teach you a lot of things about game theory and strategy and bankroll management, picking players and all that. Jeff could teach you a lot of things about all that stuff. You can't teach expected ownership right now. It's an experience thing. Certain things just come with experience. The reason why you're signing up for our site is, one, we got 57 live finals amongst us. Me, Jeff, Kevin, Thad. We know everyone running all the other sites. We know all the other content providers. And whether they're good or bad, we know where their brains are because we've been playing against them for 5 or 6 years. And we know who they are and how they think. Not to mention, I have subscriptions to pretty much every service out there, even the ones I think suck. I pay for it. I pay the $100 or whatever, $500, whatever they're charging, just so I can find out where the chalk is. So that's why you're paying for us, because we've already bought the subscriptions. We know all these people. We have 5 years of doing this. We'll tell you who the chalk's going to be. Very dangerous as a new player to try and predict chalk unless it's like Devontae Booker, because you're having enough trouble picking your right guys, let alone predicting where everyone else is going to go. Can get you in a lot of trouble there. So just lean on us for that. I think that's what we do better than anyone. Me and Jeff are two of the top people in the whole industry of predicting ownership. And you're
surprising me with how good you're at it, dude. Like I made some bets. Yeah, I made some bets with you early, like Tommy, you don't know ownership percentage, and sure enough, yeah, I think you beat me both in both of our ownership bets.
Yeah, that's really one of my only things I'm good at in life, actually. So I wouldn't take too much credit for it, but yeah, that's my edge. That's the one thing I do pretty well. I appreciate that. So
that and beer pong.
Beer pong, I fucking murder anyone at beer pong and getting laid. If you have me predict the percentage chance of me getting laid on a beer pong table, you just hit the trifecta. So, and it's 100%. So, how much chalk should be in an NBA lineup for a tourney, and how many fades? You don't have a specific number, right? It's kind of slate specific there. And that's my boy Dom.
So dependent on the slate and who those chalky guys are. Like sometimes the chalk is right. Like sometimes there's no reason to fade the chalk. Other times it's really obvious that you should fade the chalk. So it's like, yeah, that's gonna vary depending on the slate.
I think what we're gonna do, me and Jeff, next Game Theory Thursday. I didn't want to do it on this one just because there's too many freeloaders in here. So I want to make you guys sign up and put some money in my fucking pocket, biatch. But once next week, when the freeloaders are out for the subscriber only podcast, I'm going to put together a little sliding scale thing that I use for ownership percentage. It's not about how many players. I'm looking for certain numbers. So I want each guy to average about this thing. So I know Jeff has a similar system that he kind of looks at on some level. We'll give you ours to the paid subscribers, where I'm going to say, okay, if you're playing this guy today, then you need to pair him with this guy so that those two people put you in a certain lane. And we'll give you that because that's something that amateur players aren't doing that most of the Sharks, we all do. And so Dom's one of my boys. Respect, Dom, DC Mathis. We'll give you that next week. I'll go through that. We only have hit one or two more questions here because we got to shut off. I said 6:05 at the latest. Any early bird specials going for current NFL subs or NBA? Dig the site, dig the crew debating NBA package. We have them up. Those are the early bird specials on the site. They're up until October 31st. Those are the cheapest packages you're going to see right there. Thoughts on Simmons from San Antonio watching the live stream. So I think you touched on it earlier. Maybe they just tuned in a little bit late, but you think he's legit. You think the other game wasn't really fluky, right?
Yeah, I'm certainly just have a little bit of reservation, a little bit concerned, but he looked good to me. And this is certainly a much better matchup for him than the last game. And I would think he could get more run in this game. So it all lines up pretty well for him. It could be that yesterday or the first game was a little bit fluky, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, and one thing, JT Guns, I'll get to this question and we'll wrap with this, who has the Elite logo as his avatar. Love you for that. What I want you guys to do, dude, Mafia, unite. Change all your fucking FanDuel and DraftKings avatars to the Elite Mafia avatar. We all have it. I want this fucking leaderboard to be bludgeoned. There was nothing better than when Kevin won the Playboy Q. And it was literally Kevin in first, Jeff in second, Kevin in third, Jeff in fourth. Like, it was just like anyone who sees that is just like, fuck. So I don't even care for the free marketing standpoint. I just want to piss the whole fucking industry off, honestly. I want reach.
And they're going to be able to –
I want screenshots.
Yeah. They're going to be able to see that everyone else is doing well with them too. That like, we're all in this together, and it's like, it feels good when you're a part of a group. Like we're all on Mike Evans last week, and Mike Evans goes off, and we're all high-fiving each other. Like
week was the best. I mean, the Mafia took over Twitter that week.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's going to be times where we're all on someone who shits the bed, and we're going to eat it, but we're going to get each other's back on Twitter too. So when people come at us, the army comes out. This is literally a mafia. This is a family that we're building here. We're not trying to be your content provider. We're gonna little preview here. I got some fucking big shit planned. I don't want to give you a date because I know once I tell you guys anything, you jump at it, and I love that about you. But we got probably the most epic DFS party being lined up. It'll probably be at the end or after the football season. I'm going to tell you, Lisa Ann, Michael Rappaport, a bunch of NFL players, a bunch of my boys. We got some stuff lined up. My boy who runs Playboy Golf is going to be running it. Night out with Tommy G. We got some big shit going on that we're going to give you guys a heads up on, kind of an elite blowout party that'll be coming just months away, but it'll be coming. So this isn't just content providers, guys. We're a family. We're going to go out drinking together, partying together. we're going to fucking take over this industry, and you guys are going to be a part of it. So, Jeff.
And then we're going to do a night out with Jeff where we just play video games and play DFS and sit on our computers all the time. Just kidding.
And the
I want
funny
to come to the
Jeff
party
is the
too.
first guy that I bring to the party because he's the only one that stays up with me all night. Me and Jeff have been up till what, like 6 in the morning with chicks in the room. Literally like kicking chicks out of the room at 6 in the morning, taking turns in the bedroom. But yeah, so I don't know if I'm supposed to say that on air.
No.
JT Guns, let me answer the question.
That's not true.
No, wink, wink. So I've found defenseman and goalie are terrible correlation plays in hockey because defensemen rely on blocks for points, taking saves away from the goalie. I actually agree 100%, JT. I rarely play my defenders with my goalies. I should have mentioned that. That's a great point. Just because they get a half point per block shot, Jeff, in hockey. And defenders don't really score much usually, so you're relying on those. I had a defender yesterday get 7 block shots, which is unheard of. It's like 7 blocks in the NBA. It's like 12 in the NBA probably. But those shots, if he didn't block them, my goalie would have got saves. At the same token, it can be argued that a defender blocking shots also could prevent goals against your goalie. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for when rostering a goalie. Sometimes you roster a goalie and you're basically just looking for that shutout. You know, you're basically looking against maybe the Devils, who are the 30th ranked offensive team, and you're basically looking to win a GPP with that shutout or 1 goal allowed. In that situation, I'm okay with it. But if you are looking for shots, which you normally are, then I do agree with that, JT. So any final notes here before we wrap up, Jay Fry?
No, I got to build some lineups.
Yeah, go get at it. I don't want to keep you any longer. I got to get my hockey lineups done. That's it, boys and girls. We appreciate you guys tuning in. That'll be all for the show. We're going to be doing this every Thursday, Game Theory Thursdays. Spread the word. Subscribers only from this point on. So freeloaders, this was your last chance. Hope you hated it. Good luck. Stay cashing.